Hey, Julie.
Hey, Tony.
Welcome back after a long, incredibly pre-planned hiatus to special episode number 23. After our last episode with Addie, like we probably mentioned to everyone listening over and over, we were going to take a 5-week break like we always do in the summer for our
Always.
podcast.
Yeah, it's like hunting season. What do we call that hiatus again? What's the name
I
of
thought
that? You know.
it is, we're doing improv games, every year. I don't know. I'm going to eat my last cat.
Whose line is it anyways, where it's maybe, let's say it's a 3-word vacation. So I'll come up with the first word, you come up with the next.
Okay,
so our 5-week planned hiatus is substantial
growth
retreat.
Yeah, the old SGR. That's what I talk about a lot of times. And sometimes I get it confused with St. George, but it doesn't have the T in there. But yes, no, the substantial growth retreat, which,
my neighbors were just saying they wish they could take when they heard about it. And it's the science and the research about it is incredible. It's amazing.
Incredible research. A lot of people that I know do this often. Okay, I'm out. Okay, welcome back.
Welcome back,
had
everyone.
The best of intentions. It's good to see you. While we were on our pre-planned SGR, we received some exciting news, Julie. We have made some top lists for adult ADHD podcasts hosted by a male and a female, with the female drinking protein drinks. I wasn't even trying to make you feel bad about that, but I was just saying it's funny that I think we're bad with the patting ourselves on the back. We've made some, here it is. Okay, we have been featured in a FeedSpot Top 20 ADHD for Adults podcast. And if I go to that feed, we are. Do you know what number we were?
I don't.
Yeah, we just guess. Yeah, no, take a guess.
How many numbers? Okay. Like, how long's the list?
I think it's 20.
Okay, we're number 13.
That is a great guess. We are number 10. Yeah. Yeah,
okay,
right after
I'll take it.
Adult ADHD roller coaster, 2 behind You Don't Sound Autistic. Okay, I have a funny story to tell you, Julie. This is really funny to me. I have a client of mine that I love working with, and she is just now finding out about her adult ADHD diagnosis. And she also has some other health complications. I think she has 3 or 4 kids. And she was talking about one of them who also has ADHD. And she told me, I even wrote this down, that she just said, so are we, what did she say? Special needs. And I said, tell me more. And she just said that they had a assembly at a school, and they brought out a person, I think they were maybe deaf. And then they brought out somebody that had, I want to say like something like a multiple sclerosis, and then somebody with ADHD. It was people that were special needs. And I could not stop my joke brain, because I was like, what does that guy look like? They just have the guy out there and he's just all wired up. He's just looking around and he's, hey, what's going on? But I just thought that was interesting. So I think
it's like hugging people, loving everyone.
Yeah, right.
So intense.
But then one of the little kids just says, I don't like your shoes. He's like, oh man, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I mean, is that okay? The rejection sensitivity is just thick with that guy. Yeah. I don't know if I have other thoughts on that. I'm down if we're going to be on the autistic spectrum. I'm fine. Give me the t-shirt. I'll go to the meetings.
Oh yeah. 100%.
But I almost think that I got to watch out that I'm going to be invited to something, and I'm going to come out there and there's going to be paraded.
It's going to be PC. I'm sure there's going to be, if we are on the spectrum, there's going to be a way to do it and a way not that's seen as appropriate. And I do not know that I'm going to handle that well.
I'm worried about that as well.
So many jokes. You're definitely going to make jokes.
I am, but I'll try to keep those in my inside.
Just like come out. Hi.
Yeah. And somebody's going to
just like talk about myself and then feel super guilty about it. Yeah.
Right.
Have so many stories to tell you, and then hate myself after that I took over. And
I'm going to start 3 businesses while we're here. And hey, you kids, like any of you guys think about being entrepreneurs, or let's do this, and trying to put some of them into labor for me, that sort of thing. But we were number 10 on this top list of adult ADHD podcasts. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Cool. We do.
Yeah. Thank you, FeedSpot. So I'll put that in the show notes, so then people can go take a look. Here's the funny thing though. It said the frequency 3 episodes a quarter. Is that about right?
This is why it's funny. Well, this is why it's funny, because I had my podcast ICU for 2.5 years, and that's kind of what got me on my journey. And you started with the virtual couch, and then you've had
9 years without missing a week.
Yes. And like ICU, 2.5 years. That's not 9 years, but 2.5 years. The only time I took 2-week break at Christmas, both years, no other time. Consistency, that is, I would not take it from my cold dead hands. And then cute, you and I are like, let's do a podcast on adult ADHD, and have had a hard time getting it together, but it's
We really
because we're
have.
doing lots of other important things, which is great. But I
Are
am
we?
so grateful. I've had so much good feedback from people that
Same.
are loving it and like, please don't stop. So we can't stop, even though we are scattered. The genius
Here
is
comes the
coming through.
genius.
I don't know if we're genius or our group is genius or what, but like
Yeah.
good things are happening. So we're here, and we
Yeah.
appreciate everybody for
Yeah.
sticking with
Let's
us.
and here's a fun ADHD thing to do. Let's throw a little teaser that we've been working on the underpinnings of a course that I think will be very powerful sometime
Yes.
in the next decade when we get to
Yes.
it. No, but it will be amazing, and that will come sooner than later
Well,
because we are back,
yeah.
Julie. We are back. Here we are. So today we've got a
Yep.
very, very fascinating article that we teased, I think, in the episode before the last one with Addie Herman, who Addie, okay,
Mhm.
now we can talk too. If you're following her, that was such a good episode. And Addie had let us know, I think it was before that episode aired, because the way they film everything, that she had got injured. And that just broke my heart. So then when it came out and you
I
watch it,
know.
I knew that she didn't get injured in that competition, but in a future one. And
Yeah.
then, but now following her on Instagram, and she's now doing American Ninja Warrior stuff with a boot on. I mean, she's
She's
incredible.
kicking butt. I love her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was neat. I actually recently went and saw her. I was able to help get her on a stage here in Utah because she wants to
Oh,
get more
wow.
into speaking. So I went and saw her speak just a couple weeks ago. And I'm just going to say on here, like she spoke, I think there were, let's see, I think there were 10 speakers she spoke. She destroyed
Did
everyone.
she really?
And she's
Wow.
18. Yes.
18.
Like
Yeah.
to be fair, I didn't sit and listen to all of them because I have ADHD. So I was walking around and like getting jitters out and working with her on her, like listening to her speech in the back room, drinking my Diet Coke. But I heard enough of the other speakers, and I sat down and listened to her, and I was like, this girl, she's made to do powerful things. There's no question. She was fantastic.
Yeah.
She did a great
Yeah.
job. So I'm excited to keep watching her. She's doing
Same,
great
same.
things.
That
So
was good.
she's
But
awesome.
I think the episode before we talked about, we just kind of rambled a bit, and it was a very good episode. I got good feedback from that one. And we talked about medication. We just talked about being human and those sort of things. And I think we teased that we had started that episode with the idea of talking about this one, which I find fascinating in the good old world of good old mental health. I mean, we talk about the fight, flight, or freeze response. Sometimes we just talk about fight or flight response and
Hmm.
freeze. And then there is little bit of data, a little bit of movement that's talking about a fourth F, which makes so much sense that it is fibbing. And I do find this is where we start getting a little bit into that emotional immaturity realm of ADHD, where yes, we're fun, we're a fun hang, we can be tell lots of fun jokes and stuff, but we can also be very impulsive. And then you add that rejection sensitivity in there, and sometimes it hurts so bad to feel like we've done something wrong that a fib can fly out of our mouths. And you see a lot of tie into that, and that's why one of the concepts I don't want to pay a lot of attention to, but I need to at some point, is the similarities that you often see with emotional immaturity and ADHD, even leading up into
Hmm.
pretty strong narcissistic traits or tendencies. And some of it is
Hmm.
because we're so afraid to sit with the discomfort that then we just
Yeah.
immediately will say whatever at times to get out of a pickle or a jam, but we mean it from a good place, not from a manipulative place. But that can be the little white lies or the things that we do. I should take a breath here. We'll take a breath after this next part. But I did an episode a long time ago on the virtual couch about gaslighting. And I talked about these different types of gaslighting because we hear about not that there's a good version of it, but there is a version of it that is more of the, no, 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 I don't want you to feel bad. Like, I don't want this to seem like I was doing something wrong. And so instead of having the courage, and I think in that fear of rejection, to then own up to something, then that's where the gaslighting comes, maybe through a little white lie or a fib, but we
Hmm.
mean well. And even in that moment, I think and I'm keep saying you maybe haven't experienced this, but then I will tell myself, you know what, I'll go back and correct it later. But then I don't, because I've alleviated that discomfort and I've moved on, not realizing the potential negative impact it can have on the people around me who I think that I've just pulled it off in a nice way. But yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts around, have you ever, it's so funny to ask this, right? Have you ever found yourself telling a little white lie, Julie, to get out of a jam?
Hey, yes. And I feel like I'm a very, in general, honest to a fault. But I was really digging deep as we were talking about this and thinking. And I think for me, first of all, I'll come back to that. But
Okay.
it is hard to acknowledge. And I talked about this once on, I think I did a solo episode on here about labeling and labels and
Yeah.
narcissistic tendencies a little bit. It is hard for me to acknowledge that narcissistic tendencies can show up with unmanaged ADHD. Like
Yeah.
that's a little bit
Yeah.
hard.
I know.
It's a little bit hard, but it's true. And I think it's just good to recognize that any mental diagnosis or anything unchecked and unmanaged can manifest in narcissistic tendencies, right? Like anyone that's
Yeah.
not trying to do the work and be reflective with themselves and just avoid discomfort, I think that can happen to any of
Yeah.
us, right? Talk
Just
about
can
babies being narcissists,
I
right?
do.
And we grow out of that. Do we emotionally mature enough to, at least that's how I've
Well,
always seen
that.
it from your perspective. Yeah,
Well,
go
and
ahead.
what I like that that's where the more I started looking at the concepts around narcissism, then I started leaning into narcissistic traits and tendencies. Then I started discovering, okay, it's actually more about emotional immaturity and that. And I know we've talked about it on here, the podcast, Waking Up to Narcissism. I was very intentional about early on establishing that narcissistic personality disorder is a very tiny percentage of the population, 3 to 4,
Yes.
5%. But then that's where I wanted to establish with that podcast, even that we're all emotionally immature. And then the way to
Mhm.
become more emotionally mature is to start to do the work or acknowledge it. And it's really uncomfortable.
Yes.
And so that's why
Hmm.
I love what you're saying because it does often get lumped in a little bit there with the comorbidity or co-diagnosis of ADHD and sometimes emotional immaturity. But I think that I'm okay with because we can become more emotionally mature. But it is with that label
Yes.
of ADHD and narcissism that people will throw those two around every now and again. And that's where I find myself taking great offense. So I think it's been a little bit of
Yeah.
a mission of mine personally to try to redefine the concepts of just that word being thrown out everywhere to now it's emotionally immature. And I can work with that because that's what we're talking about
Yes.
here with the rejection sensitivity
Yes.
and
Hmm.
the accepting and embracing the scatter,
Right.
all those wonderful things.
And when that was really brought up to me before, I had a friend that was going through a divorce and she was explaining his behaviors and saying, well, he has ADHD. And his behaviors were very narcissistic. And also I could see the ADHD element of the impulsivity,
Yeah.
the addiction, that so many things. And there was part of me that it was hard for me to hear. And she's like, well, he has ADHD. Especially when you've been hurt by some, probably everyone can relate to this to some degree. When you've been heavily impacted or hurt by someone that you saw strong narcissistic tendencies in, to then see that at all in yourself is pretty hard to
Hmm.
acknowledge, right? But going back to your point of, so yeah, emotional immaturity and the fibbing. Okay, my fibbing is, so I feel like, yeah, if anything, and people that know me well would be like, no, she says too much. She's too honest. I'm like, it's like, Julie, when was your last confession? Because I just confess to everyone. I'm like, I thought about a word. I have to talk it out. I'm
Oh,
avoiding the
yeah, yeah.
discomfort, so I need to like talk about it. But I sometimes fib out of, it's usually because I feel guilty about being late somewhere. Like I'm like,
Hmm.
oh,
Okay, that's a
I'm like,
great
I'm in the
one.
car.
That's
Yeah,
so
I'm
good.
totally on top of it. You got it. Like making sure they don't know how underprepared I am. That's the kind of stuff of, I'm actually a little bit messy and I'm nervous for you to see that. I'm like, I got it taken care of. We're good. Or even fibbing about just coming, I don't know, is there a little bit of fitting of coming off super strong and independent when I'm actually really hurting inside because I don't
That's a
want to
great
let
point.
someone in to be rejected because
Ooh, that's
I'm like,
good,
I got
Julie.
it. I'm on my own. I'm good. Like I'm good. Even if I heard someone say this. My therapist went to a therapist, right? And I remember her
Mhm.
saying to me, she was saying to him, I don't get it because I'm like a pretty vulnerable person. She said, yeah, you're vulnerable about the things you want to be vulnerable about.
Oh
And I was
man, I
like,
was going
that's
there.
it.
Yep,
Right. You and I both are pretty open people, but there are some things that I do not talk about
for sure.
that is for EMDR and therapy. And I bawl my eyes out and it's 6-year-old Julie not feeling enough.
Yeah.
Those aren't places I go often because it's not appropriate in my profession. It's not a place to therapize.
Yeah.
But like we all have. So, anyways, that is probably where I find myself fibbing the most is maybe this core concept of I'm unlovable. And
Hmm.
so I don't want you to realize that I'm actually late all the
Yep.
time.
Exactly.
And I'm like reassuring, I'm like, it's going to be okay. I got it taken care of. Tony, don't worry. I don't even know. I probably could have watched myself. But so it's not these big fibs.
No, I like that.
I don't know. I published 5 books when I didn't. It's not that. It's these
Right.
little, I got it under control. It's good.
Yeah. Well, can I tell you, I had a really interesting interaction with somebody a few weeks ago. They got a little bit upset with me in a therapy session, and I was working on my grounded responding, and it ended up being a pretty powerful experience. They had called me over the weekend, and I have been keeping my phone on do not disturb now. I didn't know what that even meant for a long time, but it's really nice because I can create it so that only family gets through, and I've really embraced that. So I don't even get the
Yeah.
notifications. I don't get the phone calls. So then by Sunday evening, I saw that this person had called and then I did feel bad, but they had said, don't worry about it. I set up an appointment for Tuesday morning. So then I just thought, okay, good. And I left it at that. Right before Tuesday morning, I put a text together and I said, hey, just real quick, I got your message. I'm so sorry that you were going through that, but I appreciated when you said you were going to meet with me on Tuesday, that I just let that go. And then the person at one point, they were getting upset about a few different things. And then he even said, you got my message on over the weekend and you chose not to call me back. And now you're just texting me to alleviate your discomfort. And it was really interesting because I'm the only one that really does know what the truth was in that. The reason I appreciated that and I'm telling this story is because I know in the past I have done that where I have said, I didn't get your message, but I did. But I didn't want them to feel like I didn't
Mm-hmm.
care. And I also knew I wasn't going to get back to him on the weekend, but I didn't have the courage to say
Mm-hmm.
something like that. So here was a situation where this was all true. And I even had shared with him the reason I had texted him was because I didn't want to take his time during therapy that he's paying for to share what my experience was. I was going to say make an excuse, but I just thought that was really interesting because that was definitely an example that I knew I was, I want to say right about, but I knew that I was coming from a place of integrity because there have been plenty of times where I have done the old, I didn't get your text. And I am so trying hard
Mm-hmm.
now to never say that again. If I got the text, I'm trying to now say, got your text. Sorry I didn't get back to you versus the, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't see your text. So now I'm just now seeing it. And I don't know if anyone listening has ever pulled that one, but I would imagine many people have, or maybe it is just me and I'm having a reflected sense of self and assuming that everybody else does that. Although, oh gosh, I can think of a lot of situations where someone has told me, even a client has said they didn't get the text, and then 20 minutes into therapy, then they say something that was in the text. That one's always fun too.
Yeah. Well, and I think if what I go back to with that, because yeah, I've done the same thing in the past and it never feels good. And I think what I come back to is I'm trying to often, yeah, protect them from feeling bad.
Yeah.
And part of that, I feel like I've had to learn what is that about? Is that's me assuming they can't handle like the normal
That I'm
human
not giving them the
experience
chance. Yeah, exactly.
to be resilient and to handle the normal experience that sometimes someone will see your text and it's okay that they forgot. Like I'm
Yeah.
trying to protect them. And I've had to really look at that and say, okay, what is that about? Like, and let other people have the human experience of sometimes people forget to respond and you're still enough. And it's not my job to protect them from that.
Yeah. Okay.
So
It's so good. What I'm pausing for is just that I realize I don't know how we're 15, 20 minutes into this and we haven't even talked about what the article says, which is so good. So let me nerd out for just maybe a couple minutes, but jump in here at
geek it
any
out.
point. Okay,
Get
so
it.
it's in Attitude magazine, attitudemag.com, which is an online ADHD magazine that I really enjoy. You can go here anytime you want if you have a question about anything ADHD related. And I like
Will you say it
um,
again?
Attitude Mag. It's
Okay.
ADDITUDEMAG.com. But
Okay.
I really like that. So this is an article. It's by Monica Hassel. She's a RN, and Barbara Hunter. She's got her master's in education. But right above the title, it just has this little thing that says it's under this category of typical ADHD behaviors. I love that they say typical ADHD behaviors, but it says fight, flight, freeze, or fib. And this is what's funny is right out of the gate, it immediately talks about child's lying, and we're talking about adults, which I think is more the people listening to this. I don't think a lot of kids are listening. But they say, what if your child's lying is not evidence of a character flaw or disrespect? What if his fibs are actually a self preservation strategy rooted in poor inhibition, emotional regulation, working memory, and attention, all hallmarks of ADHD? This is a premise behind a new theory that is giving caregivers and educators a new neurological lens through which to view lies. And this gets really interesting. And I promise it will make so much sense to even somebody is not a big nerd about neurology. So then they go on to say that as the human brain's evolved, it's developed a self-protective mechanism designed to ensure survival in times of extreme danger or stress. Faced with threat, the brain reacts in a split second, deciding how to protect itself. And this is widely referred to as the fight or flight response. And then
Mhm.
recently, or the last couple of decades, the field of psychology added freeze as a common behavioral response. In the event of a harmful attack, it might mean playing dead while literally petrified with fear. But now today, psychologists are beginning to observe and document a fourth F that manifests in times of real or perceived danger for children, adolescents, and even adults with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and it is FIB. And here's the nerdy science, and it's really cool. The limbic region of the brain processes an immense variety of information from a myriad of sources, and it senses the presence of danger, assesses threats, and activates defenses. These limbic structures are ready to respond to a threat by activating the sympathetic nervous system, which is in contact with the brain stem or the cerebellum. A person then gets literally chemically fueled with adrenaline and cortisol being released into the body. And then that in turn triggers the decision to fight, attack and defend, flight, to flee, or freeze, play dead. The body's flooded with the stress hormone cortisol. So then as neuroscience continues to evolve, these areas that are more aligned with stress, there's this new part of the brain, new the last, I don't know, 10,000 years, the neocortex, which is the outermost area of the brain. And the neocortex came about thanks to language. So when we just grunted and things like that, this part of the brain wasn't even developed. So animals have the fight, flight, or freeze, but then they don't have this neocortex. So with complex and advanced language not available to our primitive ancestors, we have the ability to verbalize both factual or fictitious reasoning instantaneously at point of performance, most notably in times of stress and threat. So that alone made so much sense to me that we evolve and develop this part of the brain called the neocortex that is only been evolved because of advanced language. So it makes sense that it would be added to the fight, flight, or freeze that primitive ancestors or just animals have, because basically now we can talk our way out of something. So then the fib, the lie, it's a protection mechanism, which is really interesting. Protection from the feeling of having disappointed somebody, such as a parent, teacher, coach, or mentor. Fibbing often follows poor academic outcomes, incomplete assignments or projects, missed appointments. I mean, I've done that one. Oh my gosh, I forgot. Or, oh, I thought it was on this different day. Deflection, temporary, parental or significant others' anger and anticipated consequence. Fibbing also provides extension, might be caused by a desire to buy some time in the momentary absence of information. Man, see, now we're rolling. I know I've said things about, oh my gosh, I thought it was next Friday. So can I get a little more time, or I'll put that together next time? And so this provides the person with an extension of available processing or thinking time, but the consequence of the fib is not planned for. And then self-preservation, preserving self-esteem and self-efficacy, perceived reduced self-esteem of a failure due to ADHD related behavior that ended in a negative consequence, leading to shame and embarrassment. So then it allows us to alleviate our discomfort and avoid threat, but it's thanks to our advanced language skills. And since we're quick on our feet, although that wasn't evidenced by our improv at the beginning of this episode, our good old SGR, which I can't remember what that was now. So now that you got all that dump of data, so it's actually, am I reading that this means we're actually smarter than most because our neocortex is so advanced?
I like it.
Okay.
Thought. So as I'm listening to all this, I'm like, okay, so why is it a problem to fib? I mean, obviously we know it's an issue, but
yeah.
I was immediately brought to our good friend Queen Bee, Brene Brown, how she talks about belonging
Yeah.
and this whole idea that you will never feel like if you belong someplace if you're not completely authentic, because you'll always be asking
Yeah.
the question, what if they knew the real me, right? So
Yeah.
the problem with fibbing, besides, I mean, set like morals, besides whatever, what's
Yeah.
right and wrong, the problem I feel like from a mental health and belonging perspective, because I think everybody deserves to feel like they belong first to themselves, but also that they have a tribe, that they have people. Even it doesn't need to be big, but they have some people that have their back. I mean, we're social creatures, right? We need
Yeah.
human connection, right? I kind of care about that. And this whole idea that you will never truly belong if you aren't authentically you,
It's
because you're
true.
always going to sit there wondering, but what if they knew the real me? Like they like this part of me when I'm like polished and look good. But what if they knew the me with flaws? What if they knew that I tell fibs sometimes? What if,
Yeah.
which is one reason why I think I love our relationship and I love this podcast, is because it's a place that, for better for worse, I feel so comfortable being like, have you ever fibbed? Like, let's talk about it, because I say that and it's like acceptance,
Yeah.
right? It's like,
Totally.
yeah, everybody does it sometimes. Let's just say it. We're just willing to say it, you know? But
Yes.
hopefully people listen to this and they're like, I've done that too. And it comes back to
Yeah.
this idea of I'm not alone,
Yeah.
right? Because that's the great
Yep.
lie to depression, to anxiety, isolation, addiction, so many things, is this lie of I'm alone,
And I'm the only
right?
one going through this,
No one, if
and
they
everybody would hate
knew,
me.
no one would
Yeah.
understand. Yep. And that's the big lie. And so at the very least, like, you're not alone if you've done it before. And also, I think it makes it less likely to feel like you belong anywhere, though. And so that's why
Yeah.
I think it's good to be aware of.
That's really good. It takes courage to be known, and it's scary. And I think in that face of fear, then we will fabricate and we will tell a fib rather than say, this is who I am. Because in reality, I know we've talked about this, but if the other person has a problem with that, it technically isn't them issue. And so
Mhm.
it is a lot easier to be in a relationship with somebody that then is saying, oh man, you're human, or thank you for sharing that. Or now there's, and they could even still be allowed to be disappointed. Oh, I'm bummed. But,
Totally.
but yeah, but this is the long game. the friendship is. I like something he said. I've been kicking around this thought a lot about being anchored. If you're doing something that is in alignment with your personal values, or you can act from a place of integrity, that
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to be able to, I don't want to say defend yourself more, but if you know that you're being honest with yourself, then you're going to be able to go back to your, I need to come up with a better word than defense. Where this kind of comes from is, did we talk about on this podcast something after I watched a podcast after watching the movie Civil War? Does this ring a bell with you at all, Julie?
No, you and I talked about Civil War on our own though.
Okay,
We
okay.
need to do a podcast just on Civil War
Well,
because I
so
saw it
that
and it
one,
blew me away.
it did me too, but and so matter of fact, that it wasn't what I expected. And I actually was watching a podcast the next day about just trying to figure out what did I just see. And let
What
me
has
just,
just occurred?
and
Yeah.
I think this will resonate though with what we're talking about now. In the podcast, it was the Ringer podcast, and the host said, she talked about how, and I wrote this down in my journal that day, but she said the host talked about how a movie doesn't have to tell the audience the answers, but it needs to know the answers for itself. And so the context was talking about how in the movie, California and Texas had joined forces as part of the rebel actions. In a modern day, right now, that would be the craziest thing in the world because they're so different politically. But then another guy on the podcast jumped in and he said that he was so glad in this horrific scene where this Jesse Clemens was taking out a lot of people, that that character didn't turn to the camera and say, well, ever since Texas and California joined forces because of this one thing. So what the guy was pointing out was that the audience may not know why, but the filmmaker knows why, and they know why clearly. And so I wrote on here, I'm giving this note to myself because I think it's a concept in psychology where, since you're the only person who really knows what it feels like to be you, and because that ultimately you don't have to convince other people of who you are when you learn who you are, but when you're operating from a place of maybe immaturity and truly not knowing who you are, you're basically putting off this different vibe or different energy. That's where I'm trying to go with this. And so when you know who you are, you may present with more confidence. And then I often wonder if the people that you interact with in your life sense that subtle difference. I think there's the key. And so then they begin to feel safer emotionally and trust you. And if we're just trying to pull off a fib to get out of a moment of discomfort, I really believe that the other person senses that lack of my solid energy or showing up on solid ground. And I think that you do that enough when you're interacting with somebody with ADHD. And yeah, we can be fun, but in those times where we're not, that maybe we aren't as safe or trustworthy because people are picking up a little bit of that difference. Do you follow me there?
Yeah, I'm going to try to say this in like 15 seconds or less, but I just wrote a note because I'm like, I want to do a whole podcast episode on this, how this
Okay.
relates to speaking.
Okay. Okay. I can see
Which
that.
you and I have talked about this because I'm
Yep.
starting to help you with some speaking
Yeah,
things because
yeah. And I
Tony's
cannot wait. The relevant
it's
speaker,
so
here I
good.
come.
Tony's gonna,
Yeah.
yeah. I am head of coaching over at Relevant Speaker. I'm actually wearing my shirt. You
And
can have one of these when you
Julie's,
have your first paid
okay.
gig.
I'm ready. Julie's really good at
Anyways,
this too. It's been a nice place for me to
so
self-confront. It's been fun so far, but yeah.
so Tony's coming on as a student with Relevant Speaker with me, and I'm excited. But one thing you and I talked about, I feel like relates completely is the first thing we talked about was your story
Yep.
and about how if you're not clear on your story, and this is something our CEO, Donnie Salazar, really helped me understand is I ask you your story since birth, kind of, right? It's like,
Yep.
tell
Yep.
me your story since day one. And it's not because I'm looking for you to talk about everything hard that's ever happened in your life necessarily. But
Yeah.
it's so
That's right.
important that
That's
we go
right.
through your story because we find where are you vulnerable? Where have you found power? All of those things, because you need to understand walking onto the stage your why. Because
Yes.
if not, if you're getting on stage for the wrong reasons, there is going to be a disconnect between you and the audience. They may not even know why, but it's almost like a conduit. I think of like a conduit of light between you and the audience. Some people, sometimes we talk about a conduit between us and God, if you believe in
Yeah.
that and receiving like revelation or inspiration or things like that, or from the universe. But it's like a conduit between you and the audience where if you're getting up and you are not authentic and okay with you and your
Yes.
story and your authentic why, whether you're talking about it on stage or not, there is going to be a disconnect there and you will not come through as powerfully. You will not connect. It's not clear. There's barriers there.
Yeah.
And that's why
Makes
it's so
sense.
important to talk through and almost therapize your story of how you got here first. So you know why you're getting on stage. And some of that, it may be appropriate and relevant to share with your messaging on stage, depending on what that is. But I am such a believer of, as a speaking coach and as a speaker, do not try to be like another speaker. The best speaker you can be is stepping into who you are as much as possible and
Yeah.
like owning who you are. You will be the best speaker then. We can polish and make you the best version of that, but like that's what's going to come through on stage. And those are the speakers that last, that stand out, and that make lots of money and make a great impact.
So then the ADHD person, if you are confident in who you are and you are okay with the
Yes.
fact that I'm not
You don't need
perfect and
to
I'm human,
fib.
you don't need to fib. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. And I like that
Yep.
so much, because if I'm going in there and basically from an ADHD, emotionally immature standpoint, if I'm still looking for somebody to tell me I'm okay, then I am looking for validation, and I'm going to show up weaker in my delivery because I don't want to get it wrong, because I want this person to like me. But if I like myself, then I'm just being and expressing myself. And then the fib is no longer necessary. Oh, we wrapped that up here just perfect.
So good. It's so good. It gets me
Okay,
giddy.
there we
Can
go.
we do a love note? I have one.
Oh, yes. Okay. Love ADHD. Julie, you're on. I'm not going to make any jokes. I'm very grateful for this. Okay.
Dear Paul, I know sometimes you've told fibs to avoid discomfort, and often actually because you think you're protecting other people. I want you to know that if you make an effort to not fib and to show up authentically, you are going to feel like you belong more, and you are going to find your people. And so don't do it. Don't fib. Don't do drugs. Just lean in. I'm here, ADHD, and I love you, and I'm going to help you. Don't fib, because then you won't feel like you belong. Love, ADHD.
Oh, sounds like Paul had a little bit of a fibbing problem.
I was like, I got this. I can wing it. And then I was like, and don't fib and be a good
And
person. Remember who
don't
you
do
are. Love,
drugs.
ADHD.
Don't eat candy all the time.
It's true, though.
Yeah,
Okay, do some drugs if they're helpful, but you know what I
that's
mean by
right.
that.
Hey, can I tell you, this will be a fun thing to follow up on, because I know I literally have to go. I'm going to my first doctor's appointment now that I moved to Arizona, and the whole goal is to
Yay.
get. I haven't had a new doctor since I got my ADHD diagnosis, and so I'm a tiny bit nervous. What if this
Yeah.
person is not in the new insurance I got? I was able to say, what are some of the medications you're taking now, and will this doctor prescribe them? And this one does. And setting up the
Mhm.
appointment, this is the main reason, because I've been a little bit out of medication. It's funny, I find myself as a
So nothing's
54-year
getting
old
done?
mental health professional. Maybe it's squirreled away a little bit on the weekends, not taking it and stuff to get myself by. But yeah, not as powerful. So I'm a little
Makes
nervous.
sense.
I'm taking my prescription bottle, my whole medical history. I'm ready. And
Yeah.
here's my immaturity. I'm ready to drop I have a podcast, I've got, I
Yes.
want to let him know
I've
I'm
totally
kind of a big
done
deal,
it. I've
right?
done it. Yeah.
So
Oh,
we'll
that
see.
is too
I will
funny.
report
I
back
love it.
next week and see how it goes.
Sounds like a plan. Okay, thanks for being here.
Julie, yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
everybody. Okay.